And hey, everybody, welcome to episode 12 of the HOU.SEC Cast, the HOU.SEC.CON podcast. Sam and I are talking to Marty Edwards today. Marty is a Deputy CTO over at Tenable, specifically in the OT and the IoT area. And we're going to be getting into his background. We're going to be talking about his talk at HOU.SEC.CON. We're also going to be getting into an important article over at AP News about an attack on a water station. So enjoy the talk, episode 12. See you over there. And Sam, we are back, episode 12. How you doing, man?
I'm good. How are you, man?
I'm good. I'm good. We've got a lot of exciting things to go on about here, talk about today. So I've got a lot of energy and momentum. I feel like built up here with a lot of stuff happening. How about you? You feeling that
Yeah,
same
we've
energy?
been trying to keep our mouths shut, right, for a while. We got a lot to talk about.
Yeah,
So, the holidays were fun because we could take more time to focus on it. So, yeah, it's
exactly.
going to be a good episode.
It'll be good. Well, before we get into that, I do want to introduce our special guest, Marty Edwards. Marty is the Deputy CTO of OT and IoT over at Tenable. How you doing, Marty?
I am very good this afternoon.
Good, good. Appreciate you joining us. We're going to get all into everything that Marty does, Marty's background, Marty's talk at HOU.SEC.CON. We'll get into that in just a little bit, but I do appreciate you joining us. So let's talk about HOU.SEC.CON like we always do, HOU.SEC.CON segment. So Sam, I'm going to give you the honor of mentioning what we've been hinting about for so long.
I'll take one, you take the other. Okay, agreed. So we're excited. We have two new spinoff conferences, and I'll address the first one that I'm super excited about. And obviously, with my background, I'm very motivated to get this done. It's called HOU.SEC.CON, so HOU.SEC.CON, which is operational technology. OT stands for that. And the idea that this came from was, we have a lot of cyber conferences out there that do great things talking about OT and the cyber aspect of OT. But there's not a lot, like whenever I go to these conferences, there's not a lot of operational folks in the room. And I find that unfortunate because these are the folks that we're trying to get into this conversation and help us with the conversation. So the whole idea here is to try to bring these folks to the table. We're going to have good conversations around the operational environments and, what happens in these plants and things like that. I'm looking to do a debate as well between IT and OT, basically. So we're going to have a lot of fun with this, and hopefully it's going to be very limited in our attendance. So we're limiting sponsorships, we're limiting attendance here because we really want to make sure that this is the right approach, and then we can grow it from there. But super excited. That'll be April 30th at the Norris Conference Center in Houston, Texas. And that's my thing. How about what else are we doing, Michael?
So we said two, right? So we're expanding to two different conferences. So we're going to keep the flagship HOU.SEC.CON September 2020, 24th, 25th, like we talked about, but we're also going to do an HEC.SEC.CON. So that's going to be focused on executive leadership and security. You traditionally think CISOs, CXOs, that kind of stuff. We're not limiting it to a title. We're not limiting, and there's some of those conferences out there that limit, you got to have this kind of revenue, yada, yada, yada. We're not doing that, but we are limiting it to that higher level conversation, that kind of strategy conversation of the folks that are going to be there. But it is going to be mainly focused around security executives and security leaders in Houston. I'm very excited about that. If you notice, both of these conferences, we have tracks at HOU.SEC.CON that are focused on both of these. So what we've done is decided we're going to keep those tracks at HOU.SEC.CON, but we've decided to create and kind of break out those two into their own conferences during different parts of the year. HEC.SEC.CON is going to be on July 18th. That's going to be at Hotel Zaza near the Museum District in Houston. Really nice hotel. To Sam's point on the other one, though, we are limiting the folks that will be there. Both of these, we're not trying to blow up into massive things right now. We want to prove out the concepts of them and really start focusing on getting some very unique type of conferences, but that have a purpose to them besides of just a very large, which is HOU.SEC.CON, which that's turning into. So very excited about that. Both of those are out there. Go to the websites. We'll put those in the links, and you can apply for registration for those, and sponsorships. You can apply for those as well. Third thing we're going to talk about, expansion of HOU.SEC.CON, is we are now creating a HOU.SEC.CON user group called HSC User Group. That is being led by Chad Spinsky, who's the CEO over at Authenticate. We'll put his link in there as well. Those are, the first one will be on February 29th in downtown Houston. In my day job, Trace 3, and our offices will have that. And then in the Esperson building, which is a really nice historical old building, we're going to do the talk in the training room. We're going to have discussion. That's going to be it's going to be a lot of fun. I used to run a user group. Sam knows this. I used to run a user group back in the day, and it's kind of what HOU.SEC.CON came out of. So we're going back to kind of our roots and creating some user groups. Really excited about that. And what's also cool is after we get done with the discussion and get done with the presentation, we get to go up and do a little happy hour in this kind of little speakeasy in the historical Melly Esperson building, which is it's really cool. The buildings have been around since the 20s and 30s, so very cool stuff. So I'm excited about that as well. First one on February 29th, and you'll be able to register for that as well. So
yeah, I've got a question. February 29th. So are we doing this every 4 years? Is that the idea?
No. We thought it would be fun to do it on Leap Day. Yeah, but no, it won't be every 4 years. That's a good question.
I figured I'd cut that off at the pass. So there you go.
No, not every 4 years. I think Chad has got a little more energy than every 4 years. So, okay, that is HOU.SEC.CON. So now we are going, or anything else, Sam? You want to tie off on anything else?
Yeah. So by now too, we should have the form up to purchase tickets for HOU.SEC.CON for next year.
Absolutely.
So, or for this year. So go get your tickets. Let's start making sure you can get in, and it'll always be a good show. But we're going to the George R. Brown, so expect a little bit more than you're used to.
Go get your tickets soon. Do not wait. Do not wait. All right. Well, that's it for HOU.SEC.CON announcements. Now let's get into the news. So, Sam, you submitted this article for news. I think this is a big thing. And if nobody's noticed this, Sam has created this whole OT theme for all of our podcasts here recently, which is fine. It's very, very important. But this one is a really good article to post. Sam, I'm going to let you introduce it and let you talk about why it was important to you. And then Marty, I'm sure you've got a lot to talk about on this article as well.
Yeah, and there's been a little bit of groundswell press around breaches in water utilities, right? And so this is the one where the Aliquippa Water Authority in Western Pennsylvania basically had an attack, and it was it's not like this was a targeted attack against that particular water authority. It was because of a device that they had, and it was what you probably call fallout of having some certain devices in their network, right, that were available and accessible. So the thing about it really, and this is where too I'm excited because I want to talk, because this also kind of ties into what Marty was talking about, in his talk at HOU.SEC.CON, but these are small utilities that don't have the resources. I mean, water utilities notoriously just do not have funding to do these things. And people, it's one of those things. It's kind of like electric utilities too. If you're going to do a massive program or to really do cyber, you got to raise prices, and people aren't going to like that. So there are a lot of fundamental things that can be done. You hate to see this stuff in the news, but at the same time, I'm a big proponent of discussing what's out there and how we can get better at it. These poor folks, again, they don't have the funding. It sucks to be them. And, we need to step up as a community to kind of help with these things until we can figure out how to get it fixed. Right. And some of these things are basic stuff like architectural design, perhaps, and things like that. But again, it's a resource issue. These folks are here to get water to your faucet, not to secure all the things, right? And that's why I brought it up. And so, it'd be interesting to hear what Marty thinks about, this particular situation as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's thank you guys. And first of all, congratulations on such a great event. The HOU.SEC.CON event was one of my highlights last year. And I don't say that lightly because I go to a lot of events, really well run, really good content. And so I'm excited to see you guys expand there. With regards to this new reporting in the water sector, I'm conflicted a little bit, right? I mean, I like you, Sam. I like to see that mainstream media is picking up on this. I'm happy to see that various congressional committees are picking up on this and asking the right questions. First of all, I'd love to compliment the water utilities that were impacted in sharing that information, right? I mean, a lot of these kinds of events
Absolutely.
go on and we never hear about them because
Yeah.
they put it under a NDA and nobody hears anything about it. So it's great that they shared that information fairly widely in the industry and with the U.S. government. The conflicting part for me, though, is that calling this an attack is a pretty big stretch, right? I mean, these were PLCs or controller type devices that were directly internet accessible, that had default credentials in them, and the credentials were printed in the manual, like on page 1. So part of me wishes that, I know that these are tight resource constrained companies and organizations, right? I mean, I live in small town Montana, and I guarantee you that the water people here also probably don't have anywhere close to an individual that their job is cybersecurity. Usually, it's the 15th job of the engineer that is also changing the packing and the pump. So we got to figure out how to do better. Like how could an integrator or whatever consultant that the utility used to install this stuff or deploy this stuff not even do the most basic of cybersecurity hygiene? I mean, changing the password. I mean, I'm hoping that everybody at home has deployed their router and changed the router password from admin
They haven't.
admin or whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
Um, it's so we can talk all about technology and great tools to scan and get indicators of compromise off your networks and all that kind of stuff. You got to change the default password first, right? We got a lot of catch up to do here.
A lot of
I
basic stuff
agree.
there.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've seen a few people say like 2024 should be the year of going back to fundamentals and things like that. And I 100% agree. I mean, it's frustrating when things like this are put forward. I think it goes back to one of our last podcast where we talked about secure by design and having things that are secure out of the gate and not having these types of default password put on them. It's a lazy type of a build, but at the same time, a lot of these controllers and PLCs, everything have been done this way for a very long time, and they weren't designed necessarily to be put out on the internet just ready to rock and roll for anybody to get to. So it's a debate, right? It goes
It
back and
is,
forth.
and I'm sensitive. I'm sensitive to that as well. I mean, I'm an automation engineer by trade, right? And I've been there at 3:30 in the morning when the device fails, and you've got an electrician that knows nothing about networking or any of these concepts. They've gone to the warehouse. They've got the new PLC or the new controller off the shelf. They plug it in. They get it working and doing the job, and usually it's behind on whatever job it's been doing. So that it's an imperative to get it functional. Changing the default password isn't the highest priority on the list at that time. Now, we need to have a process in place that whoever the day shift person with cybersecurity responsibility comes in goes and validates that all that's been cleaned up. That's the part that's never happening. We take it off the shelf and we plug it in. It's like, it's working. Don't touch it. We do have to get back to those fundamentals.
Yep. And
And
I think it's
um,
worth mentioning too. I'm sorry, Sam. I think it's worth
Good.
mentioning too, beyond just the default credentials, what happened here as well. I mean, there's a major geopolitical issue with why this got attacked too. I mean, this is an Israeli developed and produced PLC, and you've got the Iranians attacking it. I mean, obviously, we all know what's going on in the world right now. It's been going on for a long time. So there's a lot to that as well. I mean, would this have even been an issue had that geopolitical? I'm not saying you shouldn't, because we got world peace. We don't need we don't need default passwords to get changed. But you know what I mean? There's a lot wrapped up into this whole story. To Sam's earlier point in the beginning of it, this was they weren't going after this water plant just for giggles. I mean, this was they just got wrapped up. It was a lot of.
They really
not
didn't
friendly
like
environment.
Western Pennsylvania, and
That's,
and I say that
well, I mean,
jokingly, but I will tell you, for example, I've gone to my local water board and sat in the meetings, and I brought it up, and I get eyes glazed over, and I offer help, and it goes nowhere, and I'm stunned, right? So, and I live in a major, I live in a suburb of Houston, right? So, we've done, my organization, has done some good stuff to try to help these organizations that don't have the funding, but part of this too is these organizations, while they're doing some good things by communicating out and being open about it, they do have to take a little bit of effort to try to address the issue with some of the resources that are out there now. I live in the neighborhood. My water is, I am with a company that does this stuff, and I'm offering free help to my local water authority. Like, jackpot, right? You don't have to spend any money on it, right? I mean, we're good, but but they have to also take initiative to do something about it. And, to Marty alluded to before, I don't want to wait for government to mandate any of this stuff. That's ridiculous.
well, they already,
right?
I mean, they're starting to now, right? Critical infrastructure is starting to get there.
They are, but by the time all that stuff comes down to that level and things
Yep.
get happen, I mean, we're talking about, how many inconveniences are going to happen between now and then, right?
We might be
There's another,
retired.
there's another pretty significant problem here that I don't think we've talked about enough, and that's that many of these organizations don't even know that that stuff is connected. So if there's a CISO or if there's a security sort of group, they have no clue that somebody installed a DSL modem or some 5G or LTE SIM card in something and it's talking to something. And when I was at DHS, now CISA, with the ICS cert, we saw this all the time. People would report, "Hey, I found this device on the internet." It's like, here's the IP address. Great. You know what the IP address resolves to? It resolves to the cell phone carrier. And so you can't actually identify who the end user is through the information that's accessible on that public accessible IP. And so you can regulate or mandate all you want, but if the company or organization like this water organization, if they don't know they have it, they can't be compliant on it, right? They're going to file their report and say, "Oh, yep, here's the devices we know about. They're all in compliance." We got to change the culture so that it I've harped on this for many years. It's almost got to be like the safety culture, right? Where if you see something, you should say something, and you have the authority to stop work, and you basically say, "Hey, this doesn't seem right to me that this thing is directly plugged into the internet and has a default password on it. How do we fix that?" Right? We got to ask those questions.
Well,
Yep.
Marty, I think that's part of what your talk is about and part of what we're going to discuss in your segment. So let's not steal all of that thunder away from that, and we'll get into that in a little bit. So, Sam, thanks for the article. Great article. Definitely highlights major problems. As we can tell, we're all passionate about this, and hopefully it gets fixed before we retire. So, all right.
Yeah, I'm not so confident there, but hopefully, yes.
If you're watching the video, you can see how much gray that Marty and I have right now. So
we could do a time lapse over the years, Sam, of all of the us people in this industry, and all this gray is earned.
It's like after you get elected president, right? You go from you just go completely gray. So, all right. Well, we're going to take a quick break, and on the other side of the break, we will get into the main segment, talk to Marty, get into his background and his presentation at HOU.SEC.CON. So we will see you on the other side. All right, we're back from the break, and we are going to talk to Mr. Marty Edwards. So, Marty, before we get into your talk about at HOU.SEC.CON, let's you mentioned all that gray hair that you've got because you've been in this this industry. Why did you get that gray hair? Where did you start? You said you used to be at DHS pre-CISA days. So what got you here?
Yeah, it's a long and hard traveled path, I think. So, I mentioned earlier, I'm an automation engineer by training. So I went to the British Columbia Institute of Technology. I have a specialty degree in automation and process control, heavy on the instrumentation and sensor side. And basically the first, probably third of my career, I worked in mainly pulp and paper or specialty chemical, installing, designing, maintaining, troubleshooting distributed control systems, large distributed control systems for one of the big vendors. Um, did that as a vendor employee, then moved on to do that as an end user. So I was the senior controls engineer at a large pulp and paper facility in Idaho. And then it sounds like a cliche, but then 9/11 happened. And I distinctly remember driving to work that morning, and I had friends, I I I cut my teeth in this industry with people like Eric Byers, right? And Eric and other friends like that were after me, "Hey, cybersecurity of this control system stuff is going to be a big thing." And like this is in the mid 90s, and I'm like, "Yeah, no, it's not." But 9/11 happened, and I went, "Well, if people can fly planes into buildings to use against us, what can they do to this 90-ton chlorine car that's sitting beside me?" My office was like literally right beside the chlorine unloading facility. If you open the wrong valve, lots of green gas comes out, and that's not good stuff. So I got recruited by the US government. I worked for a combination of Department of Energy, Idaho National Lab, and culminated my government service as the director of what was then called the Industrial Control System Cyber Emergency Response Team, the ICS CERT at DHS. Was there up until 2017, and then did a short stint with ISA in their training and staff director position. And then 2019, I moved over to Tenable. And so I've been at Tenable going on 5 years now, and help them with their OT and IoT practice.
That was a very succinct path. I mean, I know there was a lot more to it, right? But I mean, it's interesting that you say that too, because of the cyber is going to be a big thing, and we talk about how long it's going to take and how slow it moves, and that was the mid 90s and then 2001, and here we are 2024, if you can believe it, and it's still not to where it needs to be.
Yeah, it's we basically started this as network troubleshooters. People would call us and say, "Hey, this comms network isn't working," and so you'd have to dig into the switch configurations, and ultimately you found out that somebody ran over the blue hose, with a forklift. That's why the network wasn't working. But that evolved into, the health and hygiene of these networks. There's a lot of cybersecurity aspects there, right? We inspect these networks for cybersecurity issues, but really what we're talking about is the health and maintenance of all these devices. And I think people forget that. They think that you buy a computer, you plug it in, and you sit it there, and it works forever. Well, no, it doesn't. It's like a car. You got to change the oil in it. You got to do routine maintenance to these devices, or else they just degrade over time. And security is one aspect that degrades over time.
Gosh knows that cars these days too need the updates too. The similarities between cars and computers are getting very close, unfortunately. So
yeah, that's a whole other podcast.
Well, I've had my truck for about a year, and I've had 4 recalls, and 3 of them were about programming on the computer more than anything. Keep the emergency brake from just all of a sudden disengaging and all kinds of stuff.
I'm an old gray-haired curmudgeon. The most modern vehicle that I own or drive is a 2010, and if I could, I'd still have a carburetor and points in a backup vehicle, because it's like I do
miss my 85,
right?
my 85 S10 Blazer with the carburetor and being able to rebuild it myself and all that stuff. So, well, thank you for running through your background.
Because we're all similar there. I just want to mention we're all similar there, because I have a 99 Jeep Sahara Wrangler in the garage that doesn't have any sort of computing stuff. So yeah, that's when Armageddon happens, that's the one I'll be driving around.
Well, it's like what was it? The Tom Cruise movie, The War of the Worlds. That was the only vehicle that they could drive around that didn't have all the electrical system. They got fried when the EMP went off, right? So he was the only one that could drive out of there. So, Well, Marty, thank you for going through that. Really appreciate it. Let's get into your talk, because I do think we covered some of it in the news segment. I think we were kind of hinting, around the edges of it, but you specifically talked about the 5 essentials of a solid OT ICS security program for critical infrastructure sectors. That was the name. That's a long title, by the way. We could barely fit that on the page. No, but you were in that ICS track, and I, to your point, I mean, and we've discussed this with other guests on here before as well. There's still this gap from IT to OT on the cybersecurity side on some of those processes that are there. There's reasons for that. I mean, different environments, the focus on availability, to your point earlier as well. But why don't you kind of get into the high level discussion points that you had for everybody, and then we can kind of dig in from there.
Yeah, for sure. And I'll be the first to admit that Marty didn't really like the title. My marketing people tell me I have to put things like the top 3 reasons or 5 essentials, and I tell them, I say, you realize that every time I see something like that, I do not click on it because I know that it's fluff. But they still want me to do the 5 essentials anyway. So the whole gist of this presentation is really, I guess, stems from my frustration in the lack of investment, the underinvestment that we continue to make in this OT security space, right? I mean, and I guess what I'm trying to do is elicit some response from the audiences that I speak with about, well, why aren't you investing? And then I break that down. So the first one is, why do we need to invest? And I think that the threat landscape is pretty clear, right? I tend to not focus on nation state level actors or big attacks like that. I mean, yes, there are entities that are targeted. If you're one of them, you probably already know that, and you have a good security sort of culture in place. But this little water in organization we talked about, I mean, they weren't prepared for that. Um, Most of what I talk about is criminal ransomware, because I think that's the sort of commodity malware that the OT industry really needs to be concerned about. These ransomware actors, this stuff's going to creep into your OT network one way or another through a known or unknown path, and you're going to have a really bad day when that happens, right? So you better start tabletopping that, figuring out who you're going to have respond to it, mapping out all of the ways that you're going to isolate and segment these networks, right, to prevent the spread of it. Sort of an aside, I actually believe that situations like Colonial Pipeline went through, where they chose to voluntarily shut down some of their operations because they didn't have confidence in those networks. If I was the engineer that was responsible for pushing that system forward, modernizing it, my request would be, we need to put enough visibility and instrumentation in this environment from a security perspective that we are confident that those controls aren't impacted. So yeah, shut off the enterprise network. Yeah, shut off this billing network. Yeah, shut off this stuff. But guess what? Our ability to safely move fuel around in this system has not been compromised, and we're going to keep running. I think that should be the end goal. The end goal, security isn't the end goal, right? The end goal is to keep whatever plant or mission critical function that you have running. So that's kind of the first one of the 5. Is the threat is clear. If you're not investing in this because you believe you're not going to be targeted, just wait. Call me next year. There's so many organizations that it's not a matter. We say this all the time, right? It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And we've seen it across all verticals. So I'll pause there if you guys have any questions or comments on that sort of piece.
Well, I guess so. We often talk about, in OT, just the historical aspect of this, right? These are systems that have been left alone for a very long time. Now we're starting to connectivity, bring them into the back office for whatever reasons we're doing those, remote connectivity, et cetera. I mean, where do you start with that? Right. I mean, if, and then I'll say, I don't want to spoil it, but I'll say, like, there's some I'll call them political differences, right? The IT versus OT thing and et cetera. But like just fundamentally, like when you talk about five, where do you start?
I think you have to start with it's a cultural thing. You got to get the people working together. I mean, my presentation didn't talk a lot about the people aspects of this, but that's the most often asked question I get from CISOs, and that when I'm talking to other executives is how do we staff for this? How do I change my organization so that these people don't hate each other? And ultimately, we're all in this for the same goal: is to make fuel, or to pump gas, or to move water around, or generate electricity, or manufacture whatever your plant makes, right? And the IT people, that's their goal too. The OT people, that's their goal too. The profit sharing check comes from the sale of whatever product you have, right? It's not because patched 15 more devices this month. So I think the operations aspect is got to shine through, right?
Yeah, relationships are key, but I also see that, in a lot of conversations I have is KPIs are misunderstood, right? So you have somebody at the plant manager may have KPIs that don't necessarily aren't very well known to the folks in the IT organization, and vice versa, right? So digging into that is part of building that relationship, right? Understanding the business and making sure, hey, look, I can help you with those.
And they're different KPIs, right? And that's one of the things I see as a Tenable guy. Tenable has a great OT capability, but we've cut our teeth on the IT vulnerability management side of the house. So the KPIs that they're using, the frequency of patching, the amount of time between when patch is released and when X% of your inventory is been complete, those don't apply in OT, right? It's different, and that's okay. We just need to talk through it and not measure everybody with the same stick. So that's the kind of first piece. The second sort of area that I went into is uh, basically because of this sort of egregious amount that we're behind here, is like, yeah, don't worry about asset inventory and threat detection and all this fancy stuff that either Sam or I can sell you. Back up all your stuff first, right? You have to be able to restore after one of these ransomware incidents takes you out. And people laugh, especially when I talk to more of an IT or corporate crowd. It's like, that might mean you have to get out the 5.25-inch floppy drives, right? I mean, there's distributed control systems and control systems out there that have obsolete, archaic media. So you better figure out where that iOmega zip drive is, and you better prove that that media still works, and that you got somebody on staff that knows how to actually run the command to restore the system. And that's not a small lift in OT. So spend some time there. So if I was coaching people on what to do first, it's figure out how to recover. And once you get that recovery piece there, now you can start talking about how do we inculcate this culture into our people and practices so that we do this cyber hygiene, right? So that we do the fundamentals right. Um, so that third piece with regards to the fundamentals is essentially, I believe it's visibility. We can have this conversation in the industry. My personal opinion is that we've spent far too much money on hunting for things after the attack has happened. We're really big into threat detection, and yeah, I can sell you that too, but you're telling me you don't know what assets you have on your network, you don't know how they're configured, and you don't know what perimeter protections or segmentation controls you have between all these different networks. When I was at DHS and we sent out an IR team, and Sam, your company has fantastic IR capabilities, when we send out teams, they spend the most of their effort is reverse engineering how the darn network is put together.
Yeah.
It's not hunting for the bad guys that are in the network. It's what assets do you have and how are they set up.
Mhm.
That's table stakes. You
Yeah.
should be able to have that information at your fingertips to give those instant responders, right? So yeah, I can pause there if there's comments, but we're just underinvested there.
My only comment is now I'm sad that our local fries is closed. That you mentioned floppy disks and zip drives, right? So, but yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
remember those days. I literally sat on a call today for an hour with an industry stalwart that you would all know that, yeah, we just sat there for 5 minutes talking about how old we were and the old IDS systems that we used to look at way back in the day and
Yep.
everything else. But yeah.
I've been at many a conference where we've had to run down to fries or whatever to buy something to make something work on some
Well,
demo, right? That we forgot or that broke.
believe me, with HOU.SEC.CON, I've gone to Fry's and Walmart and other places a couple of times, Best Buy.
I
So,
hear
Marty,
you.
we don't have a whole lot of time left. So, would you give those last two points real quick, and then we can start wrapping up here.
Yeah, for sure. So one of the challenges that people always throw out there is that well, it's dangerous to, do monitoring of these OT networks or whatever. I
Mm.
totally disagree. For 20 years, we've been building custom bespoke platforms to go out and evaluate the security of these devices. Um, the technology is ready as well, right? So we talk about the threat landscape is there. Why aren't you investing? Oh, I'm scared I'm going to break something. Don't be scared of breaking something. We have the mechanisms to go in and properly engineer how to get this data out, right? So it's not a technology problem. Um, I talked a little bit about Tenable's specific solution. I think one of the biggest problems we have, especially with very large sites, and it's not a Tenable problem, it's just an issue that industry faces, is that they've segmented off these networks so heavily that in order to get sort of passive sensor coverage of all of these different segments, they have to invest a ton in new hardware to go and extract all this data. Um, I'm here to tell you that technology, again, is your friend, right? We have ways to actively query those devices as long as we have a routable path to the device. So you don't necessarily have to re architect and re engineer your whole network architecture. That was 10 years ago. Currently available technology, we can get a good view into those systems with minimal heavy duty change. And sort of the last point that was I brought sort of culminated this whole thing in is, and you know what? Your CISO or your board of directors or whoever has fiduciary responsibility over your organization or company, they are asking these questions. I have sat in board meetings, I have sat with CEOs and CISOs, and when they read the news and they see this water attack that we talked about earlier happen, they're going to come in and they're going to ask you as an engineering manager, hey, could we be impacted here? Do we have any of these things? Do we have any default passwords in these things? How are they interconnected? And so I maintain that your answer, no matter if you're an OT person or an IT person, your answer to senior leadership better not be, I don't know. Because if it is, you're going to be updating your resume on LinkedIn like the next week, right? So um, we've got all of we've got all of the reasons to invest here, and we still seem to be making excuses about why we're not investing here. And that's the biggest problem, right? I think is that it's not a technology problem. It's not a human capital problem. The people are out there. If you need, I know of several top-notch people in this industry that are looking for jobs right now, right? So the human talent is out there,
Agree.
technology's out there, the threat is real and it's there. So stop making excuses. Go out and fix this stuff.
Yep. I agree. I agree. I don't know what else to say. I mean, it's hard to disagree with it. I mean, we've been saying this for a long time, even on the IT side, right? So
Well,
it's
and
the
you don't have
excuses
to,
aren't.
yeah, don't have to boil the ocean. You don't have to fix
Yeah,
it all overnight. Just start with some basic
something.
visibility. And even if it's visibility of your externally facing assets, like go do a showdown search. Go look at what your profile of your company is. Do some of these of the most basic of basics. And then come talk to me or come talk to
Just
Sam. And we'll be
get
happy to
started.
engineer a solution that fits your needs.
Got to get started somewhere. Well, Marty, thank you very much for running that down. We really appreciate it. I really appreciate you coming out to HOU.SEC.CON to speak. Hopefully, we can get you out again
For sure.
sometime, get you out to talk. Meanwhile, stay safe up there. I know when
It's,
we're recording this, you're getting some bad weather. So
if I look outside, it's cold and blustery, and so it's below 0 Fahrenheit and headed for a lot lower. So yes, so thank you for having me on. Happy to talk to you anytime, and really enjoy your event. So I'm looking forward to seeing you again here this year.
thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Sam, any parting
No,
thoughts?
go catch is, it's the recording's up. Go catch it online.
Yep.
And wise words. And I know Marty and I are at what we call somewhat competitors, right, in some fashion, but at the end of the day, we're all working towards the same goal, and super excited to have him here as part of our community and helping educate. So thank you, Marty.
Exactly.
You're welcome. Healthy
Yep.
competition in any industry is a good thing, right? And ultimately, we want to get critical infrastructure better defended. So let us help you.
Agree 100%. All right, everybody. Well, thank you for joining us on episode 12. And remember, we've got HOU.SEC.CON, HOU.SEC.CON, we got HEC.SEC.CON, HOU.SEC.CON tickets are on sale, and the user group is on February 29th. All the show notes will be in here. The link to Marty's talk will be in here. Go check it all out, and we will see you on lucky number episode 13 soon. Thanks, everybody.